Thanks everyone for joining the penultimate webinar in our 2020 Ingram Micro IBM Technical Enablement Webinar Series. My name is Mark Miller. I'm a technology consultant here at Ingram Micro, joined by my counterpart, Cheryl Thompson, who is the senior technology consultant covering IBM systems. She covers West and I cover East. We have some great information around IBM Consumption Model, as many of us are aware, even before all the difficulties with COVID. More and more clients were leaning more towards a OpEx model instead of a CapEx model. And maybe that timeline was even more accelerated as budgets got shifted around due to COVID-19 this year. So sit back and relax and learn all information about IBM consumption models. With that, I'll hand it to Rich LaFrance.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mark and Cheryl, for hosting it. Thank you for everyone who's able to attend and to listen in. What I'd like to do is talk to you about the consumption model on power systems. And probably the biggest takeaway from this particular slide deck is going to be that cloud is a capability, not a location. And that's kind of the fundamental of where we're going with the consumption model. It's kind of modeled off the cloud, where if you need a little bit more resource, go get it. When you're done with it, give it back, and hence the term consumption. And so here's kind of what we're hearing about. Our clients are asking for private cloud. Again, private cloud typically is on-prem. It can, in fact, be in multiple locations, but they really need the ability to scale and scale quickly. They want to do it great flexibility. So if it's one core, it's one core. It's a tenth of a core, it's a tenth of a core, so it's very granular. They need it to be secure is probably one of the key things. And the nice thing about having it on-prem with the private cloud tends to be that you know where your data is, you know who's using it, you know how it's being affected, who's trying to access it, who's using it for what. And then, but most importantly, if they need additional resources, they want to have access to it now. And then when they're done with them, they don't want to have an underutilized server. They can not necessarily return it back to IBM, but they no longer get paid for it. So what we have is IBM private cloud with shared utility capacity. Note that it's available on the scale-out servers, the mid-range, and the enterprise servers. So it's pretty much available across the product line. And the other thing that they like is easy manageability. So with this Cloud Management Console, you have the ability to manage the entire cloud environment across your scale-outs, across your enterprise, across multiple locations, all on a single pane of glass. So it is available in the 980, 950, S922, and 924. The biggest thing here is now you're only required to activate as little as one core and 256 gig of memory. If you want an additional core for a base or for permanent, that's an option. So you can activate as much as you like, but if you don't want to utilized server, so you want to only pay for what you're using, this gives you very good granularity. It does come with, in the Enterprise Edition, it does come with a private cloud capacity assessment, which allows you to analyze your customers' environments. They get a good feel for what they want to put in base activations and what they want to use as metered. And I've got a slide on that. I'll show you additional detail. So going back to cloud as a capability, not a location, what happens is you only activate one core and 256 gig, for example. However, all of the capacity in that server, whether it's 12 cores, 22 cores, 40 cores, is always on and always available. Same is true with memory on the enterprise systems. So if you have a customer who's concerned about CapEx, we can, one core, 256 gig of memory, and now they pay as they use, which is where your dynamic capacity comes in. We can go to an OpEx model. There are some that really, OpEx, you tend to pay a premium for, and I'll show you a little bit. If you want to avoid that premium, you want to make sure you activate as much base as possible. So this way, yes, you have to put CapEx in, but if you spread your utilizations or your activations across a number of servers, you'll see how we can actively save you quite a bit of CapEx and avoid OpEx costs as well. So here's an example of, we have three servers, System A, System B, System C. If you look on the block diagrams on the lower right-hand side, you've got your base activations for System A in dark blue, base activations for System B in dark blue, and same with C. What IBM will do will allow you to put that in a pool. So we're going to add up all those base activations, and as long as you don't exceed the number of base activations on those three servers, you'll never get metered, you'll never get additional fees. So in this example, you'll see system A went over occasionally, system B went over occasionally, system C never went over their base. So in this particular case, the customer would have seen no additional charges. And the way we do that is you go on to, you can run an econfig to go ahead and buy capacity credits. And as they use an AIX credit, for example, that'll get debited. If they use an I, that'll get debited, same thing with Linux. But the idea is activate what you need. And much like a cloud environment, if you need additional capacity, it's available for you. And it's called a meter minute is how we do that. So here's another great example of system A has base activation, system B, system C, 32 base cores in A, 64 base in B, 96 in C. So we add all those up in the pool, we get a total of 192 base cores. Additionally, you'll see that the total number of processors in each server is 384. As long as the utilization between A, B, and C does not exceed the 192 base cores, you never used any metered minutes. This is very cost effective. It allows you to not necessarily size for peak, you size for average in all three servers, because what's the chance of all three servers being peak at the same time? And we have found this to be not only attractive, but very effective. So here's an example. If we took an E950, and there's an E950 presentation for this, an E980 presentation, there's also one for scale out. I've taken the three presentations, consolidated them into a 15-minute module, but this gives a perfect example. If I were to take an E950 with 32 cores, 1 terabyte of memory, activated all the cores and all the memory, I'd get a list price of approximately $225 and $944 with a 20% discount. If I take that same E950, now I'm only going to activate 1 core. I'm going to activate 256 gig of memory. The CapEx on that server, we've gone from $225,944 down to $114,037. So the cost for acquisition has gone down 50%. Now let's look what happens over time. And we typically use a 3-year module because it's 3-year warranty, 3-year financing, those kinds of things. In year 1, the average utilization is 20%. We're going to assume some growth. Year 2, it's 40%. And year 3 is 60%. Because we only have 1 core and 256 gig of my base activations, you can see the charges for year 1 is 18,000, year 2 is 43,000, year 3 is 69,000, for a total of 247,023. So if you look at, do I buy all my cores and memory up front, or do I use metered capacity? In this scenario, there's a 9% premium for activating only what you need and paying for what you're going to use. So the trick is, how do you determine how much CapEx, how much OpEx? How much do you want to have in the base? How much do you want to have base memory, base processors? And what IBM will do for you is, for enterprise systems, you get a 6-month private cloud capacity assessment. We'll activate everything. We'll look and see what your workloads are doing, you know, what processors, what partitions, is it AIX, is it I, and then we'll go ahead and we'll give you a deliverable. And then based on that, now you activate the number of base cores that make sense for you, the amount of memory that makes sense for you. There's also a calculation tool that you can use. It's an Excel worksheet, and what you do, perhaps the client only wants to go 5% CapEx. It'll take scenarios where, what happens if I activate 4 cores and I activate 1 terabyte of memory? What does a 3-year scenario look like? And from there, you get an idea for what makes sense for the client, because you don't want to activate too much cores, too much memory, but then on the other hand, you don't want to underutilize it either because of premium for that. So we can help the client plan for that and come up with something that makes sense. So we were talking about the Cloud Management Console is how you manage all these workloads. You know, how many cores are active, how many have I used, how many minutes, how much do I have left, how am I using them? Am I using the more processors and not so much memory? Well, perhaps I'll activate more base processors and keep my memory the same. So the nice thing is very, very flexible. This gives you a planning tool, and the great thing is it takes it all the way down to the partition level. So very effective, and this is how we kind of keep track of, you know, maybe we want to activate more processors. So here's a big key thing. If you look at the scale up, the scale out, they differ a little bit in the offerings. For the most part, enterprise, you get everything. Let's look at what you don't get in scale out. So for example, in the scale out environment, there's no memory metering. So and the idea behind that, you don't have your large memory footprints like you do on the enterprise servers. So memory metering on the scale out didn't seem justifiable. You also don't get elastic capacity with the scale-out servers. So you do have the ability to add additional processors, and we can meter processors, but you don't get the elastic capacity that you would with the enterprise models. If you look at the intermix of systems in the same pool, for the scale-up, you can put E980s in a pool, or you can put E950s in a pool. For the scale-out, S922s, S924 can be in the same pool. And then lastly, this lab services private cloud capacity. For enterprise servers, we had talked about it is included. In the scale out, although it's not included in the configuration or in the deal, you can in fact get a quote from lab services, and then depending on how much time or how much analysis you want, that'll depend on how much lab services will charge you, and that'll be a statement of work. So in a nutshell, I know it's quick. The thing to keep in mind is cloud is a capability, not a location. That's the foundation for our consumption models. 1 core, 256 gig. Go out and use as much processor or memory capacity that you want, and we will go ahead and we'll start ticking down credits as you use them. The nice thing is they don't expire, and at any particular time, you can buy additional credits. If by some chance you run out of credits, IBM will not cut you off at the knees. What we will do is we give you 30 days to become whole, at which time you won't be able to buy any additional credits or until you've gone ahead and pay whatever is the past due. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Earl.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
All right, let me share.
While Earl is doing the sharing, if you have any questions, please place them in the chat box. We would definitely like to answer those for you.
Well, good day, everyone. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here today. We are always appreciative of your time. Jose and myself are going to share some highlights of the IBM consumption model specific to storage. I'm going to cover the hardware aspects, and Jose, as usual, is going to do his magic with talking about the IBM storage software side of the house. All right, so as storage, well, I should rephrase that. As consumption pricing is becoming more important to our storage customers, IBM and other vendors are, of course, adapting their pricing models to meet the needs of our customers. And of course, these needs are typically driven by, you guessed it, cloud. So this should come as no surprise to anyone, but cloud is definitely becoming the dominant technology for the majority of our customers. And as you see here, 80% have moved applications to public cloud, 80% of our customers. And this is according to IDC. And of the customers that have moved workloads to the public cloud, 91% of them, according to IBM's Institute of Business Value, have also obviously expanded their private cloud environment. And yeah, just to deviate for a second, you know, we always hear about public cloud, the growth in public cloud, but believe it or not, there's still growth in private cloud. There's still ample opportunity in private cloud, and many reasons for that. One key thing is only about 20% of workloads actually have transitioned over to the cloud. And so that means there's about 80% that are still residing on-premise. And customers have many reasons why they're either not going to move to the cloud or can't move to the cloud yet with those 80% of workloads, right? So some of those workloads have some complexity. Some customers still have, you know, security concerns around those other, you know, 20%, or there's just a lot of effort involved. And that's one of the reasons why IBM actually did acquire the Red Hat company to help make that transition easier for a lot of our customers. But so thus there's still a big investment with on-premise technologies, right? That's why we still sell a lot of storage and again, server hardware for our customers. So there's still growth area in the on-premise. So pardon my deviation there for a second, but and about 85% of our customers today, right, have this hybrid multi-cloud environment, right, where they do have, again, that physical on-premise private cloud, and again, extending out into the public cloud, or obviously multiple public cloud providers now as well. And we have obviously a lot of exciting technologies around that today with our storage portfolio. And but obviously, cloud is very strategic to our customers as part of their digital transformation journey, and a lot of our customers obviously realize the benefits of cloud. One of the biggest, but not the only benefit, but one of the biggest, of course, is cost. It helps customers drive down a lot of their costs. And obviously cloud, its pricing is based on consumption, and customers are now starting to expect that from on-premise hardware. So from a cloud perspective, of course, I mean, when it comes to storage, that consumption pricing is driven primarily by three main things. It is capacity, right? It is also egress, the amount of data that is recalled from the cloud environment, and then it's also API calls as well. Those are the gets and the puts. So all of that always goes into the consumption-based pricing when it comes to storage. A lot of customers love that model. They want to pay for what they use and no more. And so more and more of our customers, of course, are demanding that with traditional IT. No surprise. That demand is going to go up. According to IDC, by 2023, 60% of enterprises are going to demand basically consumption-based IT. And, more and more of our customers want to move to, as Mark had mentioned earlier on when he was doing the opening, to operational expenditures. So depending on the accounting needs of the customer, of course, operational expenditures may be a little more appealing than the traditional capital expenditures, which, believe it or not, the majority of storage today is still based on CapEx, and but that is shifting. And as you see over the next couple of years, by 2023, which is right around the corner, over 60% of the storage that customers will be purchasing will be based on consumption pricing, right? So customers do want that per gigabyte per month consumption pricing, and no surprise, IBM is very astute. We're very well in tune to what the customers want, and we started a couple of years ago. We introduced our initial utility offering, just with a couple of products, but today we have it pretty much across the entire hardware portfolio, and that is the IBM, obviously, flash system family. So that's the 5000s all the way to the 9200s today, and then of course, the DS8900 family of products, the TS7700 virtual tape library, and IBM Elastic Storage system. And of course, Jose is going to talk about the software component, but this is just the hardware side. So we introduced that a couple years ago, and we continue to tweak and refine the utility offering. And this may be remedial to some of you, apologize, but to some of you it may be new and exciting. But just a little overview of how this works, but basically our utility offering with storage consists of two components. One is called the base subscription, and the other component is called the variable capacity. So the base subscription is really, when we do an analysis, so Rich was talking about analysis, capacity analysis that can be done on the power side. Obviously, we can do analysis on the storage side, and we can determine what the customer's their current needs are, and then looking at their growth, project that over what period of time, 3 to 5 years as an example. So let's say 5 years. So we look at the customer's needs over the 5 years. We can calculate what their capacity needs are going to be, and then what they need now, and then we come to what is called the base subscription price, and that typically or calculations, not price, calculations, which is typically about 30 to 50% of the capacity that'll be required over the next, 5 years, let's say. And then obviously we calculate the variable capacity. So the base subscription will actually be a fixed cost to the customer every month. They'll get a bill from IBM Global Finance, IGF, for a fixed fee for every month for the period of time. So if it's 5 years, they'll get 60 bills over 5 years, all identical. And that will meet, obviously, the initial needs of the customer. And eventually, they should start growing, obviously, into the variable capacity. And then when that happens, it is calculated on a monthly basis, the average consumption of the variable capacity. And the customer will get another bill, but on a quarterly basis for the variable capacity. So it's calculated monthly, but they're only billed 4 times a year for the variable piece. Okay, so there's 2 components, 2 bills that are involved in here. But here's the nice thing. Customer gets all the capacity delivered up front. So they get all 5 years. Let's say they want a 5-year term, they'll get all 5 years of capacity delivered up front. And after that, there's no disruption. But it can be changed. If they suddenly need more down the road, we can add it. But you know, if we underestimate it for whatever reason or their needs changed, we can adjust that, you know, as needed. But everything is monitored by our storage utility, our cloud-based monitoring service called IBM Storage Insights. No cost to the customer, of course, but it keeps track of obviously the consumption the customer has utilized. And again, just some of the benefits for this, obviously, as I mentioned, all the capacity is delivered up front to the customer. There's no disruption as the customer, experiences growth in their data needs. Reduce risk. We don't have to go in every few months and add more physical capacity, which obviously can be very disruptive to the customer. And there is some risk involved in that every time you bring down an environment or make adjustments to the environment. So we reduce that risk, and customers, of course, truly pay for what they use. And just on a side note, on an average, customers actually only utilize about 42% of the capacity that they actually purchase. Right? So they over provision. So they actually are overpaying for storage with the CapEx model traditionally. But again, we have a whole host of benefits. These are just some of the many. And I do want to put emphasis on one thing. This is my ruthless plug for high availability solution. And this is using technology called HyperSwap, which is available pretty much on all the IBM storage arrays that we have available. But customers can have a true high availability environment where within a few seconds, if one site fails, within a few seconds, everything can be switched over, right? Seamlessly failed over to a secondary site using our HyperSwap technology. That would typically involve, obviously, 2 identical storage arrays, and of course, on the server side as well, you'd have to have 2 identical server environments. But from the storage perspective, customers can actually take advantage of the storage utility offering. We have an HA solution that's part of the storage utility offering, and customers can get 2 basically fully configured storage systems for only 1.2 times the cost. So for only 20% more, additional costs of a single system, they can have a secondary system set up and configured by IBM Lab Services, again with 100% data availability guarantee with that as well. So just some food for thought on how to utilize the storage utility offering. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my good friend Jose to talk about some of the Spectrum products.
Thanks, Earl, and thank you, everyone. I also want to thank everyone for attending. I actually want to thank Earl and Rich for actually talking about a lot of the concepts about consumption models. So I can really kind of skip a lot of introductions to what this is and really get into the real meat of how we do it with software. Now, On hardware side, as Earl mentioned, we've actually been doing it at least 2.5 years now. Software side, it really started late last year. Well, let's put it this way. Emphasizing it started late last year. Let's go to the next slide. This one is really more of an overview on what it is. Storage software, that being Control, Protect, Protect Plus, Virtualize, the whole list you see here. Every one of them has an option of being sold and purchased on a month-to-month basis. So the customer basically says, I'm just going to pay it on a month-to-month, and I don't want to pay anything up front. And that's basically what how it's done. There are two asterisks in this slide, and you'll see it. It's on Protect and on Scale. And of course, we couldn't make it that easy. We couldn't call it a base subscription level. So we call it a committed term when it comes to software licensing. And if we go on to the next slide, I'll give you a little overview of how that works. So I'm going to use Spectrum Protect as the example, but it works exactly the same way with Scale. On a month-to-month, the client basically says, X number of terabytes that I'm going to use or petabytes that I'm going to use, and it's going to be, I'm going to pay on it a month-to-month. I can always cancel, just giving you a 30-day notice, and there's no commitment to it. In a committed term, what we do is basically just the way you do on storage hardware. We figure out what your normal average will be, or what you will basically use for the first year or two, and we call that in this slide it says base subscription, but we actually call it a committed term. How much and for how long? So we basically say, let's say you want to protect, and you're going to get 200 terabytes. So you're going to get 200 terabytes, and you're going to make it for 3 years. So we do a committed term of 3 years for 200 terabytes. If you happen to go over that amount for a month or so, we will actually charge you that variable use capacity. If, let's say, it was just an application that was going to go away, or for one reason or another, it was a mistake and you went over that number, and so you got rid of that storage in Protect or that data in Scale, and you bring it back down to the base, you only get charged for that one time when you go over. If you go over and you're consistent, you can actually redo your committed term for how much you want to do that for. So it is a consumption-based model for charges. And as I mentioned before, it's also for Protect and for Scale. Now, those are the first two software packages that jumped on this model, but you can expect the other products to also go that way, because the other products are already on a month-to-month. Okay. With that really is kind of the picture of how you can get software in a consumption model. Do we have any questions? I don't see anything out there. Okay. Here are some links for some additional information, including there's a video. That's all I have. I don't see any questions out there on the board. I don't see anything on the chat. So I'll return it back to you, Mark.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I don't see anything either. So this webinar will be available on YouTube. You'll all receive the links you can share with your colleagues that couldn't make the call, and we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for joining. Mark? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, for those that might have questions later after this call, or that would like to see a demonstration of the worksheet or work on a real opportunity, have them reach out to yourself or Cheryl, and you can get with me, and we can make that arrangement.
Perfect. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, and the same offer on the storage side, of course.
Sure.
Yeah, yes, and for those people that are listening to it or listening to the replay, that will be mark.miller@ingrammicro.com. or cheryl.thompson@ingrammicro.com.
All right, Rich, Jose, Earl, thank you very much. Cheryl, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes,
Have
you're
a great
welcome.
day.
Thank you.